a blood spatter analyst who murdered in plain sight to the Florida legal system designed to put serial killers on death row. In this video, we're breaking down every crime Dexter committed, the charges Florida would bring, and the years he'd face for each one. First up, the big one, murder in the first degree, life without parole. Every single kill Dexter did meets Florida's legal definition of first-degree murder with planning, the most serious murder charge in the state. Florida law defines first-degree murder as unlawful killing of a human being when done from a plan designed to cause the death of the person killed. Planning doesn't require days or weeks. In a 1990 Florida Supreme Court case, the court said planning can happen in moments, but it requires conscious decision-making. Dexter didn't kill in moments. He followed targets for weeks. He learned their routines, their schedules, their weaknesses. In Season 1, he spent weeks following the ice truck killer before trying to confront him. In Season 4, he got into Arthur Mitchell's life, went to his church, met his family, studied every pattern. He built kill rooms with plastic sheets covering everything, laid out surgical tools in perfect order, measured sedative doses to exact amounts. Prosecutors only have to show the planning. Dexter leaves planning all over his work. His ritual proves planning. His tools prove preparation. His cleanup proves he knew it was wrong. The photos of his plastic walls, the taped tools, the measured sedatives, that is planning, not impulse. In Florida, first-degree murder means life in prison without parole or the death penalty. Dexter killed over 30 people during the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation alone, 30 murder charges. Before prosecutors even touch evidence, destruction, lying, or cover-ups, Dexter is already facing 30 life sentences that run back to back. So his judgment would be 30 consecutive life sentences or death penalty eligibility before any of the other charges begin. But those murder charges only matter if prosecutors can prove them beyond reasonable doubt. Dexter thought his cleanup made him safe. Florida law treats destroying evidence as its own separate crime, and the penalties add up fast. So let's get into evidence tampering, which is 5 years per count with Florida Statute 918.13. Before Florida ever charges Dexter with murder, they charge him with destroying evidence, and those charges alone could put him away for life. Florida law makes it a felony to change, destroy, hide, or remove any record, document, or thing with the purpose to damage its truth or availability in any official investigation. Each act of destroying evidence carries up to 5 years in prison. Dexter didn't destroy evidence occasionally. He did it as a routine. That's worse than a one-off. He deleted security footage. He swapped blood samples. He removed forensic evidence from crime scenes. He hacked police computers and changed digital records. In Season 2, when LaGuerta found a blood slide at a crime scene and began reopening the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, Dexter planted fake evidence to frame Hector Estrada. In Season 7, Episode 12, he manipulated an entire murder investigation to protect himself, feeding investigators false leads while destroying real evidence. They can win tampering without tying him to a single body. They just need to prove that he changed evidence while working at Miami Metro. How many crime scenes did Dexter work on in 8 seasons? How many reports did he file? How many samples did he handle? Even using low estimates, one tampering incident per week over 10 years working at Miami Metro, that's 500 felony charges. 500 charges at 5 years each? 2,500 years in prison before the murder charges even begin. In 2014, a forensic chemist in Massachusetts named Sonja Farrak was convicted of evidence tampering after changing drug samples at a state crime lab. She got 18 months. The difference? She tampered with dozens of samples. Dexter tampered with thousands. So the judgment would be adding 2,500 years for evidence tampering alone. Every time Dexter killed a kill room, he destroyed evidence. Every time he moved a body, he blocked justice. But there's something that prosecutors would notice long before they proved he killed anyone. The crime scenes themselves would give him away. Florida forensic investigators treat overly clean crime scenes as immediate warning signs, and Dexter's perfect cleanup would become the prosecution's strongest evidence of guilt. In 2017, Florida prosecutors convicted Denise Williams of first-degree murder in the death of her husband, Mike Williams, who disappeared in 2000. There was no body, no murder weapon, no witnesses. What convicted her? The complete absence of evidence at the scene where he supposedly drowned. Prosecutors argued that the lack of physical evidence proved that the scene had been set up. Though her first-degree murder conviction was overturned on appeal in 2020, her conspiracy conviction and 30-year sentence stood, showing that Florida courts accept absence of evidence arguments when the circumstances suggest someone interfered. In the Caylee Anthony case in 2011, the defense argued that the duct tape found near Caylee Anthony's remains had been planted because it was too perfectly preserved. The jury believed it, but the principle works both ways. When evidence looks manipulated, investigators know that someone interfered. Dexter's kill rooms would scream manipulation, plastic on the walls, bleach where blood should be, weighted bags dropped offshore. The scene is neat, the story is missing. A silent room is not a closed case. It's a signal that someone scrubbed the story out of it. In 2018, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement published forensic guidelines saying that the absence of expected biological evidence means scene tampering. When someone is stabbed, blood sprays. When someone struggles, skin cells transfer. When someone dies violently, the scene tells the story. Dexter's scenes told no story, and that silence would scream guilt in a Florida courtroom. His blood slide collection would seal it. Prosecutors wouldn't present those slides as trophies. They present them as deliberate forensic record Dexter kept because he knew that he'd erased all other evidence. His perfect cleanup becomes proof of consciousness of guilt, strengthening every murder charge. Crime scenes might convict him, but Florida's evidence rules would disqualify everything Dexter ever touched professionally, and that chain of custody nightmare would trigger an internal affairs investigation that destroys him before trial. Before we break down how Florida prosecutors would use Dexter's own forensic skills against him, if you're following this legal breakdown, hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started on the charges that would bury him. So let's get into the chain of custody violations, which would be career ending before the charges even begin. If the signatures do not match, if the log is light, the sample is weak, find that once, then check everything he's touched. Florida law says that evidence must be authenticated or identified before it can be used in court. For biological evidence, this means proving proper collection, storage, and handling. Florida courts have consistently said that any unexplained break in documentation affects whether evidence can be used. Dexter moved samples, he swapped vials, he deleted digital logs, he accessed evidence storage without permission. Every time he manipulated evidence, he broke the chain. Every case he works becomes suspect. When Internal Affairs reviews a forensic analyst's work, they check randomly selected cases first. If they find problems, they expand the review. In 2013, a forensic analyst in Miami, Dade, was investigated after defense attorneys noticed inconsistent blood sample documentation in 3 separate cases. Internal Affairs expanded the investigation to 70 cases. The analyst was fired, and 16 convictions were thrown out. Dexter worked at Miami Metro for over a decade. He processed thousands of cases. The moment Internal Affairs finds one problem, one missing signature, one unexplained sample transfer, they check everything. Once they discover systematic violations, every case Dexter touched gets flagged. Defense attorney filed motions, convictions get overturned, and prosecutors don't just fire him. They charge him with tampering, official misconduct, and falsifying records before they even consider murder. His career will be destroyed, thousands of cases invalidated, and the foundation laid for every charge that follows. But evidence tampering and chain of custody violations only matter if Dexter stayed in the lab. He didn't. He stalked. He broke into homes. He trespassed. And every single one of those acts is a separate felony under Florida law. Burglary and breaking and entering, 15 years per count. Dexter's stalking ritual required breaking into homes, businesses, and vehicles. Each incident is burglary under Florida law, carrying up to 15 years per charge. Florida law defines burglary as entering or remaining in a structure or vehicle with the intent to commit an offense inside. Dexter broke into his victims' homes repeatedly. He didn't just watch from outside. He entered, searched, and gathered information. In Season 1, he broke into Neil Perry's apartment to confirm that he was the ice truck killer. In Season 4, he entered Arthur Mitchell's homes while the family slept to verify his suspicions. In Season 5, he broke into multiple locations connected to the Barrel Girls case. Every entry without permission is burglary. If prosecutors can prove he entered with intent to commit a crime inside, even if that crime was evidence tampering or future murder, it becomes first-degree burglary, carrying up to life in prison. The door can be unlocked, and it still counts. Permission is the line, not the damage. In a 2015 case, a defendant was convicted of burglary after entering an unlocked apartment without permission. Dexter picked locks, he bypassed security systems, he entered dozens of locations over a decade. Prosecutors wouldn't need to prove that he killed anyone inside those homes. They just need to prove that he entered without permission and intended to commit a crime. 30 burglary charges at 15 years each? That's 450 years before murder charges. Had tampering, obstruction, and murder? Dexter's sentence calculator breaks before the math finishes. So for this case, the judgment would be to add 450 years just for the burglary charges alone. Now, breaking into homes is one thing. Lying in official police reports? That's where Florida's false statement laws come into play. And Dexter filed hundreds of false reports during his career. Every official report Dexter filed at Miami Metro is a false statement because he knowingly gave false information in documents used in official investigations. Florida law makes it a felony to knowingly make a false statement in writing with the intent to mislead a public servant doing their official duty. Additionally, Florida law makes it illegal when a public servant falsifies records they are required to keep. Forensic analysts document their findings in official reports that prosecutors, defense attorneys, and judges rely on. Every time Dexter filed a blood spatter analysis report, that document became part of an official investigation. But he changed evidence, deleted findings, and manipulated conclusions to protect himself or frame others. In Season 2, when the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation got serious, Dexter filed reports that deliberately left out evidence pointing towards himself. In Season 7, he submitted false forensic reports to stop LaGuerta's reopened investigation. False official statements carry up to 5 years per charge. Official misconduct for falsifying required records carries the same penalty. How many reports did Dexter file in 10 years? Even low estimates suggest hundreds. If prosecutors prove just 50 instances of false reporting, that's 250 years. In 2016, a Florida police officer was sentenced to 5 years for filing a single false report in a DUI case. Dexter filed hundreds. They do not have to start with the bodies. Paper can put them in a cell, each one easier to prove than murder because the false reports are already in the system, signed, and documented. So the judgment here is at another 250 years for false official statements. False statement charges would stack fast, but prosecutors wouldn't stop there. Every action Dexter took to hide his crimes, manipulate investigations, or protect himself legally counts as official misconduct, and that's where Florida's law gets brutal. Dexter's entire career at Miami Metro was ongoing official misconduct, and Florida law punishes law enforcement officers who abuse their positions far more harshly than regular people. Florida law makes it a felony for a public servant to commit official misconduct by corruptly using their position to get a benefit or to knowingly falsify official records. When the person committing misconduct is a law enforcement officer themselves, courts apply tougher penalties. In a 2014 case, a Miami police officer who destroyed evidence in a drug case got 10 years in prison because his position of trust made the crime worse. Dexter didn't just mess with one case, he messed with hundreds. He deleted files, he sent investigators in wrong directions, he planted fake evidence through his official job as a blood spatter analyst. In Season 2, he actively sabotaged the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation while working as Miami Metro's lead forensic analyst. In Season 7, he manipulated LaGuerta's investigation so completely that she looked unstable to her colleagues before Deborah shot her. Each act of official misconduct, manipulating evidence, falsifying records, corrupting investigations, is a separate felony carrying up to 5 years per charge. Prosecutors love charging cops who go bad because it sends a message. When a forensic analyst commits official misconduct, it's not just one crime, it's a betrayal of public trust. Every case Dexter touched becomes evidence of misconduct. Every investigation he derailed becomes a separate charge. Florida courts have consistently said that law enforcement officers get harsher sentences for corruption because they swore oaths to uphold the law. In 2019, a Florida corrections officer got 15 years for blocking a murder investigation by hiding evidence. Dexter blocked dozens of investigations over a decade. The state attorney office would charge every single one separately under official misconduct laws, and judges would make the sentences run back to back because the crimes happened across multiple cases. So for the judgment, add 100 years for official misconduct across multiple investigations. The official misconduct charges would pile up fast, but Dexter didn't work alone. He had help, and in Florida, once prosecutors start applying pressure, everyone talks. Florida prosecutors would offer immunity or reduce charges to everyone in Dexter's life in exchange for testimony, and his closest allies would become the state's most damaging witnesses. In Florida, conspiracy to commit murder carries the same penalties as murder itself. Deborah knew Dexter was a killer and helped him cover up LaGuerta's death. In Season 7, Episode 12, she shot LaGuerta to protect Dexter, then helped stage the scene. That makes her an accessory after the fact, which carries up to 30 years for helping with a first-degree felony. Prosecutors would offer Deborah full immunity in exchange for testimony. And no sister takes 30 years when she could walk free just by talking. Batista, Quinn, and Masuka never knew the full truth, but they testify about Dexter's suspicious behavior, unexplained absences, and access to evidence. Every co-worker becomes a witness. Every friend becomes leverage. You don't need the whole crew. One person with details would do. In 2017, the state attorney's office in Miami, Dade got a murder conviction against a gang leader after offering immunity to 3 accomplices who testified against him. The defendant got life without parole. His former friends walked free. Dexter's relationships would collapse under prosecutorial pressure. Deborah's testimony alone would destroy him. She could confirm his methods, his rituals, his trophies. She could place him at crime scenes. She could verify his lies. The moment prosecutors grant her immunity, Dexter's defense dies. No jury believes a defendant when his own sister testifies that he's a serial killer. His closest ally becomes the prosecution's star witness, guaranteeing conviction on every charge. With witnesses lined up, evidence stacked, and charges filed, Dexter's only remaining defense would be insanity, but Florida's legal standards for insanity would disqualify him immediately. What do you think? Could Dexter's code have convinced a Florida jury that he was insane? Or would his control prove that he knew exactly what he was doing? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Florida uses a specific legal test for insanity that requires proving the defendant didn't understand right from wrong, and Dexter's code proves that he understood perfectly. Florida law establishes a rule for insanity. A defendant is legally insane only if, at the time of the crime, they didn't understand what they were doing or didn't know that their actions were wrong. In a 2005 Florida Supreme Court case, the court rejected an insanity defense for a defendant who killed his parents because he showed awareness of legal consequences by trying to hide evidence. Dexter's code is a detailed moral system that distinguishes between acceptable and unacceptable victims. He's only killed people who deserved it according to his personal ethics. That proves that he understood moral categories. He cleaned crime scenes carefully because he knew killing was illegal. That proves he understood legal consequences. Florida juries rarely accept insanity defenses. He knows what he is doing and why he hides it. That's not insanity. Dexter's ritual proves planning. His cleanup proves awareness. His code proves he distinguished right from wrong. He just disagreed with society's definitions. It's not insanity. That's planned murder with a justification. Florida courts would rule him competent, mentally sound, and fully responsible, which means that he's eligible for the death penalty, the same method he used on others. So there'd be no mental health defense available. Full criminal responsibility established, death penalty remains on the table. With no insanity defense, no witness willing to protect him, and evidence stacking into the thousands, Florida's verdict becomes inevitable. Let's add it up. Even before Florida prosecutes Dexter for a single murder, the combined sentences from tampering, false statements, burglary, and obstruction would exceed multiple lifetimes in prison. 500 counts, and this is a low estimate of 1 per week over 10 years, at 5 years each, that's 2,500 years. 30 counts of breaking into victims' home at 15 years each, that's 450 years. 50 counts of false reports at 5 years each is 250 years. 20 counts of block investigations at 5 years each is 100 years. So the total before murder charges is 3,300 years in prison. Florida allows consecutive sentencing for separate criminal acts. In a 2016 case, a defendant received 6 consecutive life sentences for multiple murders committed over 2 years. The judge ruled that each victim deserves individual justice, so sentences couldn't run at the same time. Dexter's crimes spanned a decade. Each tampering incident is separate. Each burglary is separate. Each false report is separate. Prosecutors would demand consecutive sentences for each charge. Florida judges would agree because Dexter's crimes weren't impulse. They were systematic, professional, and sustained. Now add the murder charges. 30 counts of first-degree murder. Florida's sentencing guidelines require life without parole or death for each count. If prosecutors seek consecutive life sentences, Dexter receives 30 life terms before parole eligibility even enters the equation. If they seek death, Florida uses lethal injection, 3 chemicals given in sequence, 1 to sedate, 1 to paralyze, and 1 to stop the heart. The same clinical precision that Dexter used on his victims. So the final judgment would be 3,300 years plus 30 consecutive life sentences or execution by lethal injection. If you enjoyed watching how Florida law would absolutely destroy Dexter, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. And check out our next breakdown, why the ice truck killer versus the real FBI isn't even close, to see how he actually stack up in the real world.